Some people leave Boyle and never look back. Today's guest is not one of those people. She grew up on the Carrick Road before life carried her from a war zone to New York and then on to a town in Mallorca. But Boyle has stayed with her the whole time. Today's guest is Nicola Wynne, and you're very welcome to episode 92 of the Voices of Boyle podcast. Nicola, you're very welcome to the Voices of Boyle. How are you?
I'm doing great, Carlo. Thank you so much for inviting me. What an honour.
You're absolutely welcome. I know you're on a fly-in visit to Boyle, so when I heard that, I says, gotta grab Nicola, get this episode in. So, in traditional style of the Voices of Boyle, let's start with the early days. I know your family, you grew up in a family that was very connected to the people of Boyle through the legal practice. So, maybe tell us a little bit about what did Boyle feel like as a place growing up?
The early memories of Boyle growing up, my mum and dad built a house on the Carrick Road in, I believe, 1965, 66, and myself and my two brothers, I'm the oldest, Paul and Jonathan, still live in Boyle. I was the wild child who took off as soon as I could leave town. My early recollections of growing up, well, as you know, my dad was Harry and he had his brother Tom, who had the pub on Main Street, Christy, who worked with my grandmother, Lily, in the newsagents on Main Street in Boyle, Auntie Maura, who was married and living in Longford, and then we had Uncle Liam, who was living in Dublin. So growing up, the memories are really amazing. I had a sort of a town life and a country life. Living on the Carrick Road, I was surrounded by farms and farmland. So my lovely friends, who I'm still friends with, all from the Carrick Road, we grew up playing in the fields with frog spawn and collecting rose hips for some initiative by the nuns for, medicine in Africa. It was a very peaceful and a very joyful childhood. We walked to school with our friends. It was a very unrushed, very natural growing up period. Then, of course, we had Granny, who had the shop. So during the summers, when I was old enough, I could go and work there. So I got to know a lot of people in Boyle who would come for their cigarettes or their newspapers or their sweeties. And at one point, Christy had guns and fishing tackle. So
did, yeah.
Yeah, it was I had a really idyllic and very happy childhood. And
then just kind of how much of the person then that you are today, Nicola, would you attribute to your upbringing in a place like Boyle?
So I had a very privileged upbringing and I'm very conscious of that now. My parents were very happily married and my dad, because he was from Boyle, obviously became very successful. And as a child growing up, you didn't really understand what that meant. We had a car, we had nice holidays. My mum was from Dublin, really beautiful lady. But she was from Dublin, so I think in a lot of ways she didn't necessarily understand the ways of small country town. But I had a very sort of nice blend of both. Obviously, my grandmother in Dublin had a whole different life, but she was originally from County Clare. So I think growing up in Boyle, even though at the time I didn't quite realise it, I have a strong affinity to nature, to the rivers, to the trees, to the flowers, to small town life. And I've carried that with me throughout all my life, even though I've lived in several different countries, big cities. I'm currently living in a very small town now in the mountains in Mallorca, and I attribute my happiness to living there, to being from Boyle, to having been raised in a small town and to having enjoyed the simple pleasures of life that really have got nothing to do with money, but more to do with people and a sense of community and a sense of belonging. Yeah. And I think being a Wynne in Boyle always stood for something, because there was such a lot of respect for all of my father's family, and my grandmother, who lost her husband when my father was 3. She and her 2 sisters raised her children in Main Street. So I remember when my grandmother died, I was living in Germany, and I remember coming home and seeing my dad cry. And he felt quite sad because she hadn't been a big mother figure. She was a provider. But his 2 aunts who had lived upstairs, Auntie Kathleen and Auntie May, had been more the maternal figures upstairs. Okay. So I don't know why I'm reminded of that, but yeah, my grandmother was really a great business lady, and I guess in the 30s and 40s, it was difficult to be a single woman in business in Ireland.
Of course, yeah, and a lot of stigma associated with that then as well, back in those days.
Yes, I believe the banks were not as favourable towards women, and their demands were slightly more strenuous than if it had been a gentleman, but we won't go there.
No.
we'll keep to the topic.
But yeah, so obviously then there's going to always be, in a town like Boyle, or any town really, you're going to have characters, that you can remember. Obviously family members, but characters in Boyle growing up. Do you have any that stand out for you, Nicola?
I do, Carlo, and it's so funny. I was thinking about it before I came on, and one of my earliest memories of being with my dad, going to Clement Sheeran on Main Street. He had the petrol pumps.
Opposite the bank.
The bank. And it was the old petrol station. And I remember my dad would always buy his petrol there, and Clem was a character. So that was one great memory. Then the other great memory I have, and my friends who grew up with me on the Carrick Road would probably remember this gentleman very well, Mr. Hanratty.
I remember him.
Yes, from out the Roscommon Road.
There was had he 1 or 2 brothers? He definitely had 1 brother.
I don't remember him ever having a brother.
Okay, right.
But he had a horse, a donkey and cart, and the donkey's name was Marmaduke.
Right.
And Mr. Hanratty wore his overcoat, and he always had it tied with a piece of string. And he would walk his donkey and his cart in and out the Carrick Road, and we would walk along the road and chat to him. And I was just asking a friend this morning, where did Mr. Hanratty come from? Because he was definitely English. I have no idea how they ended up coming to Boyle.
It's not an Irish name anyway.
No. And he had a very distinctive, he was definitely from England. So they were 2 characters that I certainly remember.
I think where I'm getting confused, Nicola, is he had sons then.
Correct.
And there was 2 brothers, I think, in
yes.
the sons. And that's who I never remember the father that you're referring to, but I do remember the sons. And I think one of them had he was an architect or something.
Yeah, I think he was an engineer with Roscommon County Council.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
correct.
That's right. Yeah, so we're on the same page.
Well, we're on the same family, but we're just you're a generation below me.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm too old. You're too young.
So then, school days. Early school days.
Early school days, well, I think like a couple of other people who you had on the show, Sister Philomena was my first school teacher with her Milshawns, the penny for the black babies, completely inappropriate now. School in Boyle was great. Happy days. Obviously no social media. No pressure on us as children. Everybody just played. They were happy days.
Yeah.
And simple days. And the people who I went to school with, thankfully, I'm still friends with most of them.
Okay.
Yeah. I've stayed in contact all those years. And one of the nice things is my 2, I guess, closest friends growing up, Irene Madden and Laura Ty, their dads grew up with my dad and they were friends growing up in their childhood. So it's very nice to see the three of them have three daughters who became friends. Now, you know, we have the next generation.
Yeah.
Paul's son, Timothy, is friendly with Irene's nephew, Barrack.
Yeah.
So it's lovely to see the old kind of Boyle families where the generations
Yes.
continue the friendships and the connections,
Yeah.
which go, as I say, way back to my dad's days.
I think that plays a lot with social media. I think, as you said, we didn't have social media in school when we were growing up, so there was more of the physical interaction with friends rather than through a screen. And I think those lifelong friendships that you talk about are as a result of having to make that extra effort. Not extra effort, we knew no different, but there was a more social connection and cohesion between friendships as opposed to now where it's a lot of it is screen time, you know, to an extent.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder, how did we know if you went out to play, you just somehow had some inbuilt clock that you knew when to go home for your lunch, or it was time to go home after tea, or what for your tea. So I don't know how parents do it right now. Even my children, we didn't have phones and they didn't have social media growing up. I have two sons now who are in their 20s, but we didn't have it. Now it's much more difficult, I think, for young children and for parents.
It is, yeah. It's a lot going on. You know, a lot going on. I can only imagine. So your father, Harry, who everyone would know, he started the legal practice that's still currently in operation as of today.
Yes.
Run by Jonathan and Paul. Could you maybe give us a kind of bit of background on, because I do remember as a very, very young fella, it was the original location was in Main Street.
Correct.
Obviously it's up now on the entrance into SuperValu, but maybe can you bring us back to maybe the early days as best as you can, Nicola?
Sure. So as I had mentioned earlier, Dad's father had died when he didn't know his dad, and my grandmother had 5 children to raise, so she sent the boys to St. Mel's boarding school in Longford. And I remember Dad saying to me that one of his best friends from Longford, his family, they had been solicitors for many generations or a couple of generations, and he admired their lifestyle. They had a nice house and they could have maybe nice holidays. So Dad wasn't born into the legal profession. It was something that he chose to do, and he always sort of made a joke saying that he started out on his own above what was Fred Perry's supermarket in Main Street, which is actually right next door to where Dad was born. And I think he sort of told this story when he had a celebration when he was practicing for 50 years, and he said that I think his first client came to see him and he had one sod of turf in the fireplace. He was sweeping the floor himself. He was everything in this new law practice. And whoever his first client was came in and said, Jesus, if you only have one sod of turf, what does this mean for me if you're going to be my solicitor? So he started off by himself and persevered and was resilient. There were other practices in town, and he, as you I suppose know, became very successful, and then thankfully my brothers joined him. I think at one point there was hope that his lovely daughter would pursue the profession, but I'm afraid I was more interested in travel and curious about different places in the world and different things. So I never grew up saying I want to be a solicitor and join the family practice, although I'm sure my dad would have loved if I had.
Yeah.
But he started, as I say, in Main Street.
Yep.
Then he moved up the street to where the O'Haras were. They were my dad's cousin, and they had their practice there. He had his offices there. And then later on, moved up to St. Patrick Street and joined 2 buildings there. And his then partner, Vincent Harrington, who's also from Boyle, who sadly passed away. Vincent was his business partner. Sadly, Vincent died at a very young age. And then Paul and Jonathan came back to the practice, and they're still running the practice now.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember Vincent. I can always remember him walking in the Warren direction with his long trench coat.
Yes, of course.
And he had a briefcase sometimes, and a very young man, as you said.
Yes, he was only 42, poor Vincent, when he passed away. Yeah. And of course, he was from a great Boyle family as well, from the Harringtons, the Taylors.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So Mihal is his brother, yeah.
So you mentioned there, Nicola, that there was high hopes that you would join the family business and the trio would have continued on the legacy, but that wasn't your calling. So what was, you mentioned there you were more of into a bit of travelling and nature and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe tell us what after school, or how did you kind of, because I know you've lived in a couple of places which we're going to get into, but how did you get itchy feet? Like, what was the impetus for that?
I think the itchy feet, which my mum probably wouldn't be so delighted to hear now, it started when I was about 12, it was decided that I would go to a boarding school in Dublin, which was a very strict convent, and I loved it. I loved the independence and the need to find ways to survive by myself, even though I felt homesick a lot of the time. All the girls were from all different parts of Ireland, and obviously all had different experiences in life. So I guess I formed a kind of a desire to explore different places and see different things by being very independent from a very early age. I went to UCG. I wasn't a great student. I had no interest in academia at all. I liked to party. I still do. But then during those university years, it was kind of a trend that you would go to London and find a job in London, or you would go and get a J1 visa, or there was a kind of a trend of, I don't know, picking grapes in France, and then there were canning factories in Germany. So I wanted to experience all of these things. Of course, all with the complete understanding that I was earning money for the following year in college, which of course never happened. But anyway, my long-suffering parents indulged all of these adventures. So I just got a taste for different countries and different cultures and different ideas. In many ways, I found Ireland, certainly in the 80s, and I think a lot of people who are listening to this or who grew up in the 80s would agree with me that we lived in a very repressive society that was very much dominated by the church.
That's true.
And there wasn't a lot of room for stepping outside of, I suppose, the mainline expectations that were held in society during those times. Certainly my parents, particularly my dad, was always very supportive to anything that I wanted to do. I had lots of crazy harebrained ideas of places I wanted to go and things I wanted to be. But he always, and my mum, they always lovingly supported me through any of my endeavours. So the minute I graduated, I had spent, I think, 2 summers in Germany, and I immediately, the minute I graduated, moved to Germany, where I lived for 3.5 years. And that was the start of, I guess, a lifelong career outside of Boyle, even though we're now talking about Boyle and
of course,
what it means to me. So, yeah, I spent 3.5 years in Germany. Then I came back to Ireland for a year. And then through some, I don't know, miracle, if you call it that, I went to work in former Yugoslavia with the UN, where I worked and lived for 5.5 years.
What around year would that have been?
That was in the 90s, right around the time of the
Croatian War of Independence.
Former Yugoslavian.
91 to 95, actually. So it would have been bang
correct.
in the centre there.
Yep.
Okay.
I went in 1993.
So what was that like then? If you have any recollections of like living in a war-torn country, I presume at that stage.
Yes. It was a very formative time in my life. I met my ex-husband, who's from Slovakia. I was one of very few women working there at the time. We were civilians, obviously. It was a very big military operation for the United Nations, and they recruited about 10,000 civilians worldwide to support this huge mission with 40,000 military. So I remember sort of telling my parents, oh, don't worry, I'll only be in, I'll be in the sort of safe part, with no idea that I was going to be thrown into something which was really, I suppose, in many respects, quite dangerous. The siege of Sarajevo was taking place at the time.
Oh, really?
Yes, but it was also very exciting for me. And I suppose the fact that I had learned to be self-sufficient and independent from a very young age gave me, I suppose, strength and resilience to survive in a very
hostile
and a very difficult environment. And also it was a very male environment. There weren't very many women. So it was really it was an amazing experience, but it was also a very difficult time and an exposure to really how easy it is for humans to turn against each other. And war can happen really anywhere. And it was particularly sad because these were people who, I suppose, like in any country in the world, it was neighbour against neighbour. It wasn't like an external force coming in and trying to annihilate them or kill them. This was something where people had grown up together, possibly a little bit like in Ireland, Catholic versus Protestant, or Democrat versus Republican. These were neighbours who situations changed, tensions changed with the collapse of the Soviet Union and with the collapse of Yugoslavia. We have 5 new countries that came out of that war, or there were independently 5 new countries. But at the time, these were all emerging new nations. So it was very difficult. It's funny when I think about it now, some people that I worked with, local people who worked as interpreters to help us, because obviously we didn't speak the language. There were a few sort of uprisings, and some of these people who I worked with, they lost their lives. They were murdered by the opposite side. Of course, we were safe because we were under the flag of the UN. But yeah, it was an interesting time.
I'm presuming then, as you travelled around even the area we're in former Yugoslavia, there would have been checkpoints all over the place.
Absolutely.
And were they intimidating? Or
yes.
Yeah, they were. Okay.
Very. And we had freedom of movement throughout the entire area because we had white cars with the UN written on them. But yes, it was very intimidating at times.
Was there any stage, Nicola, during that period that you felt genuinely in danger or fearful? Like, because you hear people when there are in these kind of conflict zones, there's always one time that they felt, yeah, that was a little hairy, or there was something that, could have gone wrong. I know anyone can be in the wrong place at the wrong time,
yes.
Of course. But
yes.
Was there, you're in part of the UN, so you're going into areas under the guise of the UN flag, if you like, but that can also be seen as a little bit of a, a red flag to a bull.
Yeah, of course. I suppose crossing over checkpoints. You know, there were a lot of hijackings, and, you know, you would hear that there was a sort of a military hospital near where I was, and regularly the ambulances would be hijacked. So yeah, there were times when it was a little bit scary. But, you know, you got on with it, and it was also very exciting.
Yeah.
And now when I look back on it, I say, oh my God, did I really do that?
It's a life experience.
Absolutely.
Like,
it's like, it was really, it was a great experience.
yeah.
Really
and
great.
Your two sons, Marcus and Harry.
Yeah.
I think I've met Harry.
Yes.
Were they born over there, or they're Irish?
No.
Okay.
Harry was born in Ballinasloe, delivered by a Boyle man, Nicola Wynne,
All right.
back in the day, and Marcus was born in the States.
Ah, okay. So the States, a nice little segue.
Yes.
How did you end up in the States? You were there, I believe, in Jersey City, I remember.
Correct.
I'd say maybe 12 to 16 years or something.
20. Yes.
Oh, wow, okay.
20 years. So while I was in former Yugoslavia, I met my husband, Vladimir, and we got married here in Boyle. And Harry was born in 1998. So now I have the only grandchild of Harry and Mary, and my lovely brothers, Paul, their only nephew, and I'm living in a war zone. So all prayers were sent up to heaven and to God that, oh dear, what's going to happen next? So by, I guess, divine intervention and good fortune, we got a call to move to New York, and my husband was working in peacekeeping with landmines in New York. So Harry was 4 months old, and the three of us moved to New York in 1998.
Okay. And you then, was that your first foray into the real estate industry?
At the time, I stayed at home. I wanted to stay at home and be a stay-at-home mum for a few years. Then we had Marcus, who was born in New Jersey. And then, unfortunately, things with Vlad and I didn't work out. So we separated, and I wanted to have a job that was flexible, that I could be close to the boys. It was also shortly after 9/11, and I didn't want to be based in Manhattan, where if anything happened, I couldn't get across the river to get back to the boys. So I decided to become a real estate agent locally. So I was 5 minutes from my house, 5 minutes from the boys' school, and the rest is history.
And so were you in New York for 9/11 when it happened?
I was.
So that's interesting. What was that like? Mayhem.
That was one of the hardest things to have experienced. I remember the morning that it happened. Paul Wynne, my brother, had been with me the day before, and Paul had been staying with me for 10 days. Marcus, my youngest son, was 8 weeks old, and it was my first day on my own with my two children. And I went to the gym, brought Marcus with me, and Harry had started a little play school. And as I was going into the gym, somebody said, oh, a plane has clipped the World Trade Center. And a couple of weeks earlier, a small light aircraft had hit another building or clipped a building in New York. So I didn't pay really very much attention to it. I was more focused on, I need to do this class. The kid is sleeping, so can we just get on with it? So I remember being in I think it was some kind of a workout class, and a guy ran into the room and he said, oh my God, one of the Twin Towers has collapsed. And I remember running to pick up Marcus. There was a kind of a creche in the gym, and running out onto the street. And there was a bus stop, right? It was a YMCA, and there was a guy sitting at the bus stop waiting for the bus to bring him to New York to work. And this was in Hoboken. And I just said to him, I said, "You're not going to New York?" And he looked at me and he said, "What do you mean?" I said, one of the Twin Towers has collapsed. It's been hit by a plane. And I remember running to a friend's house. She lived close by because her husband worked in one of the towers. And I remember running to her house and ringing the doorbell, and he answered the door. And he had been actually underground at the PATH station, which took you straight to the World Trade Center. It was 2 stops to the World Trade Center. And he had told me he had come upstairs. Somebody had said it had been hit, and he just saw the towers collapse. It was a devastating time. I can't really explain to you the impact, other than for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks later, the smouldering embers and the smell of death was just really something that I think only if you were there that people can fully comprehend really what it meant.
It's kind of, crazy that you were in a conflict in, former Yugoslavia, and then you moved to, New York, and 9/11 happens. And it's like, a lot of people, because for most people, I think 9/11 would have been one of the defining periods. It is probably of my time, because it changed the world in ways we're still kind of coming to grasp with. But there must have been a crazy sense of fear, though, in the immediate aftermath, because when it came out, it was, terrorists or whatever. People must have been feeling, can they do this again? Obviously, Pentagon and elsewhere that happened. But did you feel like, how far away was it, like where you were living, maybe as the crow flies?
So I suppose the best description would be if I was standing in the dune shore, if I was standing at the end of the pier, and I was looking across at Drummond's Island. Drummond is the biggest one on the left, right? Or is that?
That's Drummond's Island, is that in the Lough?
Yeah, in Lough.
Right, okay.
So if I'm in Dune Shore and I'm looking at the first island closest to me, that's how close it was.
Wow.
You can put your hand across and almost touch it. It was right there. I used to go to the World Trade Center almost every day to buy the Irish Times before Marcus was born. Harry and I used to go every day to buy the newspaper. I could buy an Irish Times. It was a sort of a ritual, because I wasn't working at that stage. So yeah, it was. And
did you have friends that you lost during that, or people you knew? Yeah.
One of the first person who was actually identified, he was a cousin of the Purcells here in Boyle.
All right.
Who, through some Adam and Eve, I'm related, the Wynnes are related. His was the first body that was identified, and he worked for Cantor Fitzgerald on the 107th floor. I remember going to his funeral. Yes, I knew a lot of people who were impacted and who, lost their lives. Yeah, it must have been some experience, though, to, live through something like that, being there with family and just not knowing what could happen or what couldn't happen. Like, such a scary time. Yeah, it was a very, I can remember, because my husband was working in the Secretariat in New York, and he wasn't able to get home for 5 days. So I came home that day from the gym and had 37 phone calls from around the world. Are you okay? Are you safe? But I wasn't actually able to make a phone call to my husband. And he ended up walking. They had evacuated the UN building. He walked with one of my best friends who was also working in the Secretariat. They walked down to the East Village, but he couldn't come home for 5 days. So I was by myself with my 2 kids. And I remember having this feeling of terror that a plane was going to fall down out of the sky onto the building we were living in, or just that total uncertainty and vulnerability of what's going to happen next. And the stillness, there was an eerie stillness where nobody really knew what was going to happen next. But
very, very, yes. So then you got into the real estate brokerage business.
I did.
They call it brokers in the States, don't
yes.
they? Yeah.
You're a realtor.
Realtor, yes.
A realtor.
Yeah, realtor, yes.
I was a realtor. I am a realtor.
Was that a tough industry to kind of get into? I know it's a saturated industry, so as a result, it would have to be a little bit tougher.
Well, I suppose having a bit of a gift of the gab, being Irish, having an Irish accent. I suppose I fell into it in that I didn't want to be, as I said, I didn't want to be restricted to a 9-to-5 job. I didn't want to be located in Manhattan. I wanted to be close to my kids because if anything happened, I needed them to have the security. And in many ways, I wanted to replicate the type of childhood that I had, where the family home was, you could walk to school, of course, walk to your church. The town was close by, and I really wanted to try and replicate that type of childhood growing up experience for the boys. So, of course, innocently, I thought being in real estate would be a flexible job and that it would be very easy, but it wasn't any of those things. Basically, you just got your license. You had to have a license, which I got, and then you're on your own. I didn't know anybody. I mean, of course, you kind of know people, but it's not like if I'd started in Boyle where I knew everybody.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a hard graft, very hard work. I was quite lucky in that Jersey City where we made our home, was traditionally a kind of a safe and famous place for Irish people who came through Ellis Island. There was a sugar factory in Jersey City where a lot of Irish people started off. Obviously the police force, the fire department, lots of Irish, lots of, connections to Ireland. So it was always very helpful when I said, they'd say, "Oh, are you from Ireland?" And I was like, "Yes." They were like, "Oh God, my great granddaddy is from Mayo or the Mahonies." So, real estate has been my profession now for I'm in my 21st year. I had a very successful career in America and did well. Brought a lot of my hometown values, particularly my dad's values, who always had a saying, "There's enough for everybody to go around."
True.
So, that sort of killer instinct, or that kind of, I suppose in certain cases, where people would...
Cutthroat.
Yeah. I mean, of course, you have to be tough and you have to do your best to get to win the listing, or to get the house to sell it, or to convince somebody that you're the person that you need to I'm the person that needs to represent you if you're trying to buy a house. But I always tried to keep it that I could sleep with myself at night and know that I hadn't screwed somebody or done something dishonestly. So, of course, Dad was always very at the end of the phone for advice, and he was always very encouraging. And
that's nice. Because that's why I said it was a saturated market, obviously in the States, and then you're trying to kind of sharpen your own teeth out there. So I would have presumed there would be an element of, it's a cutthroat industry, but you were able to, as you said, with your charm, the Irishness, all that, you made it work. So you were there for 20 years in total.
Yep.
Then did you come back to Ireland before?
So unfortunately, my husband and I, we split up and my visa in the US was attached to him and through the UN, and it expired when our oldest son, Harry, just right before he turned 21. So in order to stay in the United States, I had to come out for 3 years and wait for my youngest son, who is a US citizen, Marcus, to turn 21.
Oh, and then you could get back in.
And then I could go back in. As an American citizen, you have to be 21 to petition for a parent.
Okay.
So I always knew in the back of my mind that I was going to have to leave for 3 years, but I didn't really focus on it and I didn't really think about it. And then about a year before this inevitability, Dad got sick and I was coming home very regularly for about 10 months before he passed away. So he died in 2019, which was the year that I also had to leave the US. So he died in March and I had to be out in July. So I had no time to really think about it. And I had set up my business in such a way. I had a business partner who I was working with. And basically the plan was to come to Ireland for 3 years. And if there was a big deal or a big client, I could just go in and out. But basically my business partner would handle the business while I was in Ireland.
Okay.
So then the inevitable and the most unbelievable thing, well, no, it wasn't inevitable. The most crazy thing that happened to the whole world was COVID.
Yeah.
At this point, I was renting a house in Boyle.
Oh, so you were in Boyle for the
Yes.
kind of... Right.
I had to leave, as I say, in July of 2019. I rented a house in the Warren and then COVID happened shortly after that. And I have to say, Carlo, it was probably the happiest, most amazing time in my life to be back in Boyle. I was very fortunate I wasn't working, having worked 7 days a week for really about 17 years on the trot in the States and worked hard in real estate. Suddenly I was in Boyle in my hometown. My youngest son was with me and it just changed my life and changed my focus and changed my direction. So obviously I was extremely sad about Dad dying and also the pain of having to leave the United States, which was not something I wanted to do, but I had no choice. I didn't want to violate my visa because I was heading straight back. Well, that was the plan. So suddenly I found myself in Boyle and we couldn't go anywhere. So for the first time in my life, I felt kind of grounded, my foot nailed to the floor. And a very nice lady who has subsequently passed away, a lady called Mary Menton. I met Mary one day. I was out walking and she was on a bicycle. And I said to her, oh, I'm so jealous you're cycling. And she said, well, you know what, Nicola? She said, I have a second bicycle in my house. Why don't you come down and I'll give it to you? So she gave me this bicycle. So every day I would get up super early and I was on my bike by about 8 a.m. And I started cycling all these roads and up the Curlews, down to the Dune Shore, out to Rockingham, cycling and cycling and cycling. And I started to take a lot of photos. And I started to post a lot of photos on Facebook.
I remember that.
And I started to reveal myself a little bit. And I was really, 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 really struggling because I was so sad about losing Dad. And I was just so angry that I had to leave my finally successful business in the States. I couldn't understand why this was happening to me. What had I done that all of these negative things were happening to me? So taking the photos and being in Boyle and being around the familiar places and the familiar faces was very healing and very helpful, and people were very kind. And the fact that I couldn't run away, I couldn't go to another country, I had to just be, changed me.
And how long did you stay during, I know obviously maybe a year or two, was it, in Boyle?
I was a total of 3 years in
3
Ireland.
years. And that would have been the longest stint
Yes.
since you were grown up?
Yes.
Right. And so you mentioned there that it was such a, I presume, a positive time, even though there was sadness, of course, but it was a positive time for you, because did that lead you then to, because I know now you're based in Mallorca in Spain. So how did that come about? Was that a result of being around in Boyle and then making a decision, yeah, I'm going to go to Spain, or how did that come about?
So I think during the time that I wasn't working, I did work very briefly in Dublin for about 15 months after my year and a half in Boyle doing nothing. I suddenly realised that I really needed to be around nature, and I didn't want to work in concrete jungles anymore. Even though I still fully anticipated that I was going to go back to my life in the States. And I worked briefly for, as I say, for a real estate company in Dublin, and I really hated it. I didn't like it. And my oldest son had moved at this point to Mallorca. So I phoned him. I was over a couple of times, just very briefly, but I phoned him one day and I said, listen, I'm coming over to stay with you, and I don't want to hang out with you. I don't really want to spend too much time with you, but I need to come over to think. So I flew over for 4 days, and I flew back to Dublin and told my boss in Dublin, I said, I quit.
Like that? Just
like that. And he said to me, I'll give you more money, or can we talk about it? And I said, no, I'm done. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy the industry here in Ireland. It just didn't suit me.
Yeah.
So I remember standing out on the street on a Wednesday and literally looking up to the sky and saying, okay, Dad, I've never asked you for a direct, help here, but I've never quit a job in my life without a plan. So I need a sign. And I can remember it was Wednesday and saying, please send me a sign. The next day, Thursday, got a phone call from somebody I know very well who said to me, hey, what are you up to? And I said, well, I've just quit my job here in Dublin. And he asked me, would you be interested in an opportunity in Mallorca in real estate? I said, yes. I said, I've just come back from Mallorca yesterday. He said, well, why didn't you call me? I said, why would I be calling you? I didn't know anything of your connection to Mallorca. So the following Monday, I flew back to Mallorca, met with him, and we've been in business ever since in Mallorca. So I have a real estate business now in Mallorca.
So you've dipped a toe into the real estate in the States, briefly in Ireland, and now Mallorca.
Yes.
So what's life like over there? Because I know you're coming and going and it's great and all that. So, tell us, what is it like?
So I live in the west of Mallorca, which is exactly like saying I'm from the west of Ireland. It's amazing. The parallels are very similar. I live in a very small town. I'm a blow-in. Of course, I'll never be considered really a local there. However, I have a lot of friends there. It's very famous for hiking, for cycling, beautiful coastline. Obviously, we have very nice weather. And I think everything I've been through in my life, and certainly the pain of having to leave the US at a time when my career was very successful and I was finally able to put some money aside for my retirement, I could never have believed that I would find somewhere that would make me feel so happy. So I'm surrounded by the most amazing nature, and I suppose money. Of course, we all need money to live on, but it's not the goal now for me. It's more the experience, lifestyle. The Mallorquin people have been incredibly welcoming towards me. Both of my sons now live in Mallorca.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah, which is, how did that happen? How did I get so lucky?
Yeah.
I am involved in some local groups in the town where I live. I play with a big drumming group. We play at all these amazing Mallorcan festivals. It's like carnival drums, Batu Almong. I don't know what it even means in Spanish.
And is it a kind of an expat community, or is it?
It's a very mixed community, right. Carlo. Yeah. And I would say I've been there now for 3 years, more and more with political change in the world. Social change everywhere. I think people are looking more and more for peaceful existence, tranquility. I think people are trying to jump off from being surrounded by conflicts and social issues. Of course, we have social issues. We have a major housing crisis also in Spain. I'm involved in the industry, so it's difficult. There's been quite a lot of backlash in Spain in general because we have so many tourists coming in there. Not enough housing for local people. Everything is very expensive. The cost of living is very expensive. But it's a small town. Yeah. I feel it's like living in Boyle again. And I suppose the time that I spent in Ireland, those 3 short years, particularly the time I spent in Boyle, just made me realise that my heart feels the lightest and the happiest when I'm in smaller environments with older people. I have a lot of old friends because they remind me of my dad. They remind me of Christy. They remind me of the characters who are still left in Boyle that we cherish, because every time we lose somebody here in Boyle, we lose a piece and a connection to the past, which is why for me, coming home to Boyle and maintaining the relationships and the friendships, it's so important, because we're all from this little town. And, you know, your mum's business, you and I growing up, spending time on the lake, your dad, all of these connections to people. I like to try and maintain those. And I know there's a lot of criticism about social media now, but I have a whole family of friends on Facebook. I'm very bad on Instagram, but on Facebook. And a lot of my friends are from Boyle. And it's so important. And for me, having lived almost all of my life outside of Boyle, things like Voices of Boyle, People and Places of Boyle, the other social media channels for Boyle. The thing that always brought me great happiness, and still does when I live away from Boyle, is to see the old photos, to listen to the interviews and the chats with people, because it keeps us connected. Because at heart, I'm always going to be from Boyle. I'm proud to be from Boyle.
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah, absolutely. So, Nicola, then, do you speak some Spanish?
Un poquito.
Un poquito.
Not enough.
No. Are you interested in furthering the language, or do you need to where you're based?
So, I am taking Spanish lessons all the time. Through my great adventures in my life, I do speak German. So,
fluently?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we have a lot of German-speaking clients, and yeah, my Spanish needs to be much better, Carlo. So if you can, if your Spanish is good, we can do Spanish lessons together.
It ain't good.
Right, we have a dialect in Mallorca, Mallorquin, which is a derivative of Catalan. So it's quite confusing. I can just about get by.
Okay.
I wouldn't sell you a house in Spanish.
Yeah, not now maybe.
No, hopefully soon.
So then you mentioned that you wanted to go back to the States back maybe when you were forced to leave. Now that you technically could go back, I'm getting the vibe that you don't want to go back.
No.
No.
I was there recently and I had the best time that I've had since I left the States, even though it's crazier than ever. No, I don't want to live in the States anymore.
That chapter is finished.
That chapter is finished, but I will be eternally grateful to the great country that America is for the amazing opportunities that it gave to me and gives to all people. If obviously you have to be within the system legally.
Sure.
But America is really a great country and gave me amazing opportunity, and I learned a lot living there.
And then do you see yourself based in Mallorca for the foreseeable future?
I don't know, Carlo.
Yeah.
I think my goal now is to work and to be able to take 3 months off per annum. 1 month for Ireland, 1 month for America, and 1 month for somewhere else. That's the goal.
Oh, that's a nice goal to have, yeah, because you can do a bit of traveling in between and elsewhere.
Yeah.
And just maybe to touch a bit on Boyle, obviously growing up in Boyle, what feels different about Boyle now, Nicola, compared to when you were younger? Obviously everyone knows the main changes and stuff like that, but at the core, do you think Boyle has remained the same as a small town community?
That's a difficult question to answer. I would like to think it hasn't changed fundamentally, but I think it has. I think as people we have changed. I think there is a greater need for kindness and empathy. Everybody's going through stuff. Everybody's experiencing different challenges in life. It saddens me to see so many vacant buildings in town. This kills me because all of those buildings were occupied when I was growing up. They all had shops. Initially, when I came back to Ireland, I had dreams of renovating maybe a building or two and trying to have some kind of accommodation for people to live in. It's the great dilemma of 2026. It's frustrating for me to know that so many people don't have an opportunity to find somewhere to live. So that's difficult. Obviously, every time you sort of look at social media, somebody else has died. I know we all have to die. It's sad to see so many people who we've grown up with or loved pass away. But I do believe that people from Boyle are resilient and we have to persevere for goodness and for the future and for our children and for our grandchildren. So I try to project optimism and positivity into the future and be hopeful. And that's really...
Yeah, I think because with the latest news of the Aldi development going ahead, there's a bit of, two sides. There's all them old buildings that are now going to be taken down. Yes, but that has to happen in order for progress, which I do see both sides of the coin. And I think it's a positive thing because Boyle has been stagnant, as we well know, for a few decades now, while other towns have progressed. So I think hopefully Boyle, this might be the start of a renaissance in Boyle to, for the next 5-10 years, hopefully more development comes to the town. I do think overall it's a very positive change for Boyle. But then you have the other side that says, you know, all these old buildings are now, you know, retaining them. But my thing is, it's positive.
Oh my God,
And we need
it's
it,
essential.
and we need it,
It's
yeah.
essential. We have to have it.
Yeah.
We've missed so many opportunities, really, over the years for whatever reason. And, you know, I wish I had a solution.
Yeah.
You know, I wish I was a multi-millionaire. I would invest my money in Boyle because I believe in the town.
Sure.
My brothers live here. My nieces, my nephew, my mum is here. The people I love, this is where I grew up. Of course, we all want the same for Boyle. So for me, any new investment, any progress is good for the town.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll see, you know, more progress and more accommodation for people.
Yeah.
So it's positive.
Yeah, exactly. One or two final questions I have. This one I think is fitting for you because of the nature of your profession. But if you had a billboard and you could put the billboard up, I've asked this before and it's interesting. If you could put that billboard in the middle of the town up on the Crescent and it could say one thing on it, one message that everyone that came into the town would see, what would that message be?
The West is the best.
It sure is.
It is.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just one last one. What is one memory of Boyle that you'll carry with forever?
Lynn. Lynn has always been one of my favourite places to visit. Long before Dad passed away, I would come home from wherever I was living and spend maybe an hour or two just walking, visiting all the graves, visiting all the people and stopping and remembering people. Not only my own people, but all the people from Boyle. So
It's a peaceful place. Yeah.
it's an amazing place. And when I go up now to visit Dad and I look back down onto the town and onto the river and down onto the mill and everything, it's, you know, I know it's the same view that my father saw, his family saw, his predecessors, all of us. So Lynn for me is something, it's a place I will always carry with me in my heart. And I have to give a shout out to the committee that are taking such
Great work.
great care. And it's so important because it's the common denominator between all of us. We're all there together and collectively as a town, all of our loved ones are there. So Lynn for me is always the place.
Yeah.
The place.
And is there anything we haven't touched on, Nicola, before we wrap up that you'd like to talk on?
No, I think just to, I'm so grateful to the people of Boyle who've always shown me such kindness and affection. My brothers and of course my mother, especially now that she's on her own without Dad. The goodness in Boyle is, maybe that's what needs to be on the billboard. Boyle is good and the people of Boyle are great. And I'm so proud, so proud to be from Boyle, County Roscommon.
That's a lovely way to end it. So thank you very much, Nicola, for coming on. I appreciate your time. I wish you all the best. And I'm sure we'll catch up somewhere down the line. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlo. A privilege to be on with you. Thank you.